What's going on? Thomas Jordan here, and on this channel I help you grow your network and your net worth by adding a video to your podcast. And in this video interview, you're going to learn all about trademarking your podcast, podcast copyright rules, and fair use when it comes to podcasting. All from an actual entertainment lawyer. I even added some time codes for you as well. And make sure you stay to the end for some free gifts to legally protect your podcast. Here we go. What's going on, everyone? Thomas Jordan here with another episode. Today, we are joined by the podcast lawyer, Gordon Firemark. Gordon, how's it going, buddy?
I'm great, Thomas. Nice to see you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So, dude, we're going to jump right into it. Tell us what you do and who you serve.
Well, as you said, I'm the podcast lawyer. I've been practicing entertainment, media, and business law for nearly 30 years now. And of course, in that time, technologies have evolved and things have converged and changes came about. I started podcasting myself 12 and a half years ago when I first sort of discovered the medium. And in so doing, I realized that there wasn't a lot of explanation of the legal stuff for folks that do podcasting and new media. So I actually wrote an ebook about it called The Podcast Blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. And since then, that sort of has positioned me as the podcast lawyer.
And it even says it on your thing. So yeah, it's official now. But so do you think that people, when they start podcasting, whether it's for a hobby or for their business, do you think they let the legal side fall to the wayside a little bit?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. People don't think about what they're doing as being the kind of thing that carries risk and exposure. And unfortunately, oftentimes it's left until there's a problem when they think about it. And I really view my role as sharing information and educating people so they can avoid those kinds of problems that you can have with, anytime you're creating media. You as a trained journalist, you knew you had the training to understand intellectual property rules and privacy and defamation and those kinds of things. But a lot of folks getting started in podcasting didn't get that training. And so I'm here to fill in some of those gaps.
And what are some of the main gaps you're seeing right now with beginners and even people who've been doing this a while?
Everybody who starts a podcast wants to use the opening strains from Back in Black by AC/DC as their theme music or something like that. You can't. Don't do it. You just can't. It's copyright material. And everybody thinks they have the answer, that it's fair use or those kinds of things. So using other people's content is probably the biggest mistake I see that new folks in the podcasting space get into. And beyond that, it's the kinds of things that you say on your show that might hurt a person's reputation or reveal private information about them, or sometimes even just using a person's name or likeness or their voice, their recording without their consent, without their permission. So my sort of crusade is everybody who's doing a podcast that has guests on should use a release form and have the guests sign something. You and I didn't do it today, but you hereby have my consent to record my voice and use it throughout the world in perpetuity in any and all media now known or hereafter devised.
Yeah, breaking our own rules.
Well, but the reason that you want a written release is that unless you're a lawyer and you're going to remember to say all of those things I just said, you're likely to leave something out if you just do it orally. So better to have it in writing so you know it's done right every time.
Yeah, we'll get it linked up in the show notes below for everybody who has it. And like I said, with people with so many podcasts starting these days, and even with, I know there was a rule about you can use 3 to 6 seconds of whether it's AC/DC or a soundbite from somebody else. Is that still a thing, or can you still get tagged for that?
So it actually never was a rule.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
It's a misconception.
A big misconception. Okay, well, clearing that, dude.
Yeah,
I have thought that for 10 years.
Well, the reason for the misconception, and again, coming out of a training as a journalist, you came from a place where what you were doing was newsworthy. And so using stuff like that in that context probably fits into the exception or the defense to copyright infringement called fair use. But it's actually a much more complicated analysis, not just how long a piece of stuff you use, but also how substantial is it compared to, the whole. What's the nature and purpose of what you're doing? and what's the impact on the market. And in music in particular, there's a very robust music licensing market. You can buy the rights to use music. So that kind of thing is seen as an end run around having to pay for something. And that doesn't usually pass muster.
And can't that get expensive? But like, I don't know who you would get in contact with to call ACDC, get them on the horn and
Right.
ask them how much that would be.
Yeah, you're going to go to the record company and the music publishing company because there's two copyrights. And they're going to have to go back and ask the guys in the band or their heirs, if some of them have passed on, those kinds of things. It gets to be time consuming and expensive. I'm frankly more concerned about the time, because if you're trying to put out a podcast episode this week, you might be waiting 5 or 6 weeks for the permission. So
I feel like it'd take longer than that, but
yeah.
So just be safe and just probably not use that. What about just like little like tag phrases? Like I know even in YouTube, there was like a lot of people were using this thing from SpongeBob, this transition that'll say like 5 years later or something like that. It was one of those things. And bigger YouTuber that I follow had to go back through all his vlogs, all 400 vlogs, and manually take those out because he was getting tagged. He wasn't getting monetized.
Yeah. Same issue. When you use something created by someone else, you are infringing on copyright material, unless that someone else was creating it 100 years ago or more, So yeah, I mean, the best practice is don't use anything that you didn't create yourself or that you haven't obtained permission for. Now that said, I can comfortably say, use the Force, Luke, right here, orally, right here. I'm not using a clip from the movie. That short of a little phrase itself isn't a protectable, copyrightable thing. But if I was using a clip from the movie where Obi-Wan says it to Luke, now I'm actually copying something that is protectable. So
dang. And we kind of talked about release forms, even with interviews like this. And me, I've been interviewing for years and I'm super interview heavy. How important is it to have a release form, just get it signed, or have a little, I know with softwares like Calendly and stuff, can you just use the little ticker and that work? Like, or do they have to sign something?
The what we call click wrap agreements, where you click through something or type your name and you're done, those kinds of things, those are valid and binding in most situations. I wouldn't use it if you're buying a house or condo or a business, but for these kinds of things, it's perfectly reasonable to rely on those kinds of click wrap agreements and electronic format kinds of things. I think it's very important. Look, again, in the news journalism world where you're doing interviews, the subject would see the camera, the microphone, that you're a journalist. They would sort of know what they're getting into, and you could rely on some implied consent. The other thing is that in the news world, you shoot it today, it goes on the air tonight, and tomorrow everybody's forgotten and moved on. Podcasting, YouTube video, these kinds of things, they have a life, they live on, they're evergreen. And so that consent becomes more important when you have to contend with people coming years later and saying, hey, I didn't give you permission, those kinds of things.
What about like emails? I'm curious, because I'm sure a lot of people are going through this as well that aren't using these release forms. But what about just like an email thread of, basically agreeing to be on the podcast, and God forbid, like they said something they weren't supposed to, or something was wrong, and then they're like, oh, whatever, take it down or something. Is that email thread enough to... does that have enough weight as the release form?
Yeah, emails can serve as essentially evidence of the agreement to appear, and whatever the scope of what was said in the emails would essentially help articulate what the agreement was. The trouble is, as I said earlier, when I recited my litany of permissions, if you leave something out of the emails, if it's not all in there, then there's an open gap, and those are the things that lawyers like to drive trucks through.
Damn. And aren't there specific lawyers that handle those sort of situations that are like looking for super meticulous stuff like that?
Well, look, any lawyer who is taking a case from somebody who's upset about this is going to find those kinds of loopholes and openings. Their first question out the bat is, did you sign anything? Did you agree? And well, I've got these emails. Well, let's see them. And they start pouring over. That's the nature of what lawyers do, is that sort of that investigation into the facts and law. Are there special kinds of lawyers that do it? Entertainment media lawyers are the ones that I think most of these cases get referred to. And the litigation ones are the ones that file lawsuits and make your life miserable for years on it.
Yeah, but I feel like with smaller and with, podcasts and shows that are just starting out, do you think if it ever did get to the legal part, do you think it's just best to take the video down and just kind of forget about it, learn from it, and then start using, these type of documents?
That is certainly one approach. And hey, take it. If you don't mind taking it down, then it's easy. The problem goes away. I think, though, that, look, for folks who are doing journalism, especially if you're telling important stories and that interview is part of an important cycle or whatever, or frankly, it's just part of the history of your show, taking it down may not be the ethical thing to do for your relationship with your audience. If you have sponsors and advertisers on your show, or you're monetizing, hey, they expect that episode is going to stay there. So if you take it down, now you're in breach of a contract with your sponsor or your advertiser. So there's all kinds of secondary and tertiary issues that can come up from this. And so that's why, err on the side of caution. And the other thing is approaching these things, even if you're in it just as a hobby, just doing this for fun, coming at things like a professional with an attitude of professionalism means having these legit processes and systems and things in place. And that's what gives you the ability to grow, because if maybe you're real small, but if you want to stay that way, great, just keep doing things the way you're doing. If you want to grow, give yourself the confidence and security and feeling of empowerment to take some risks, and minimize what the actual risk is. Having that release agreement is a way of reducing the risk that you have a guest come back later and say, take it down, or you mischaracterized what I said, or you misquoted me, or whatever, and throwing shots at you. So
yeah, and I think everybody just doesn't think it's going to happen to them. And I'm super guilty of this. I've been doing this almost been in the industry for 10 years, been podcasting for 2. And I just, like I said, even in this interview, just broke my own rule. But I really need to get, because like if and when, it's only a matter of time. Like you do this long enough, people are so, I feel like, quick to, I don't know, if they didn't like something they said. I had one interview where the girl said something and she didn't even, like, I know where the line is because I tread the line myself and my,
sure.
But it's just like, she didn't like it. And I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
But
well, that is a valid thing, is you may present the release to somebody who says, nope, not going to sign it.
Yeah.
This is an important moment in your decision making. You may decide to go ahead anyway and just trust
roll the dice.
I might have to take it down if she doesn't like my episode.
Yeah.
But it may also tell you an awful lot about who you're dealing with and whether you want to continue dealing with them. So yeah, look, some celebrities they're not going to sign it. They're going to send it up to their agent, their lawyers, and you're going to have all kinds of back and forth. And yeah, in those instances, again, when you're dealing with someone who has an experience level in this industry, the implicit consent may be strong enough. But when you're dealing with someone who hasn't, just wrote a book and it's the first time ever doing media tours and things, you're better off with the signature than without. That's bottom line.
Yeah, because I was even just thinking, because even on somebody kind of like you said, I feel like it would speak to somebody as a person, whether it's like somebody our size or even a little bit bigger, mid-level, or even at the top tier. If they're not willing to do it, it's just not, I don't, like you said, I would be a little weary too, because it's all about value. Like the way I come across as value, I'm not TMZ. I'm not trying to do anything like that.
Yeah.
But even with the celebrity level, like I have plans to start reaching out to high level influencers, celebrity level people. I don't even think, I'm not even going to attempt to throw that in their face, because dude, they're getting hit up all the time. And I guarantee, I think they would either laugh or just, I think it would just be a hurdle.
Well, and in that situation, it may be good enough to have a little scripted statement that you read as you start recording. Okay, we're recording now. You understand we're going to be doing this. It's a podcast. It's going to be published this way. Everything good? All right, let's go.
Oh,
and
okay.
And there you go.
So maybe do it verbally.
Yeah, you could do it verbally. Again, having it scripted though, so that you get
Yeah.
all of those things in. And when people download my podcast release form, which is free, I include a script for the oral version of it. So that will work.
Yeah.
It's just, the formality of the process is sometimes useful. I will say also, though, when you project that kind of professionalism, some people are worried that it's going to alienate the guests, and I think it's just as likely that it's going to give the guest a feeling of confidence that they're dealing with a pro.
Yeah. And it's been a second since I looked at it. Is there anything in there? I know it's really good and it's perfectly worded and everything. Is there anything about running it as an ad
No,
on there?
in fact, that's sort of specifically excluded. Ads for the show, yes, but ads for other things, no. You don't want to, again, if you're getting George Clooney to come on your show, he's not going to say yes to you using his recording and likeness to advertise, Coca-Cola.
Damn it, George. We've been talking about so much about like release forms and things. What about like names, like trademarking names to podcasts, to shows and everything like that?
So trademarks are words or symbols or phrases, those kinds of things, logos that are used to identify a particular source for goods or services in commerce. So example, you buy a box of crackers, it's got a red triangle in the corner, that's coming from Nabisco. Mm-hmm. They're authentic Nabisco Triscuit crackers or Ritz cracker, whatever it is. If you, and the show title for a podcast or a video series could also be a trademark. It has to be distinctive, so not descriptive. My own podcast title is a great example of what not to do. It's Entertainment Law Update. And so when we started it 12 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to protect it as a trademark. And unfortunately, over time, it's acquired a kind of distinctiveness and it's recognized as being from us now. So we do have a trademark. But the point being, you want to pick something that stands apart and distinguishes your show from all the others out there. So you stay away from descriptive titles and things like that. Once it's distinctive, you can register it as a trademark and prevent others from using titles that are confusingly similar. Trademark law is all about avoiding confusion. It's to protect the consumer, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So would you recommend for people starting out immediately try to trademark something? Because I feel like what a lot of, like startup entrepreneurs who are going into this, whether they know they're a startup entrepreneur or not, everything's evolving. Like my show evolved. I went from talking to people in the entertainment industry. And now it's basically the same thing, still talking to creatives, still talking to professionals, but people who are using video to build their brands and business. But I don't, like I said, I don't think people think about all the legal stuff up front. And I guarantee you they're not thinking trademark right off the rip.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to, not right off the bat. Okay. I think that it's sort of third on the list of things that you want to think about. Number one is, of course, what's the content? You're not infringing anybody else's intellectual property. Number two is who owns this thing? If you're working with co-hosts and guests and things like that, make sure you've got that release signed by every guest. Make sure you've got a contract with your co-host, or maybe you have an LLC to house the business of the show so that the ownership is clearly identified and distinguished, and you own what you think you own. Then it's time to start expanding on what that ownership embodies, and that's where making sure you have your brand protected, because trademark is a brand. Make sure you have your copyrights in place for your episodes. That doesn't necessarily mean you register every episode for a copyright, but you want to make sure you're taking the right steps for your circumstances. And then when you start to monetize, that's the fourth layer of things, where you're getting into contracts with your sponsors and advertisers or whatever other monetization scheme you're using. You want to make sure you're playing it by the numbers.
Yeah. So what happens then? You're building your brand and business, you're starting to get traction, you're starting to make money, and you've used this name and that's what everyone knows you for. And then you go to trademark it and it's taken.
Oh, yes. Well, hopefully you did a search before you started, so you don't get into the situation of having it taken when you get there.
So where can we search just to make sure it's not taken?
Well, there are comprehensive trademark search services out there. You can go to companies like the trademark search company is one of them. Talk about your descriptive terms, right?
Yeah,
Thompson,
right.
Thompson CompuMark is another one. They cost hundreds of dollars to run these searches.
Oh, really?
But it's about protection. You're protecting yourself against starting up your show and 10 episodes in or 100 episodes in, you get that cease and desist letter from the other guy's lawyer saying, time to stop. And by the way, go take all those episodes down. Right.
Yeah.
Or change the title of all those episodes. I mean, that's, it's a big project. So it may be worth a few $100s to have confidence. But at the very beginning, what I would say is do a search using your favorite search engines. Google it. Do a search on Amazon. If there are books by the same title, that's a good indicator. If there are films and radio programs, those kinds of things by the same or similar title, that's a good indicator that you want to go back to the drawing board. Then you can go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. If you're in the U.S., of course, this matters. You go to uspto.gov and do a search on their trademark search service. It's called TESS, Trademark Electronic Search System. And that will give you some indication of whether or not the same or similar phrases are being used in connection with similar kinds of goods and services. Trademark doesn't protect a chewing gum manufacturer against somebody else calling their podcast Doublemint, or something
Yeah.
like that, or Big Red.
Yeah.
The trademarks are registered in categories. So that's when you have to do some, just use some judgment about whether or not it seems likely that they would come into the entertainment and media space or not, and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. What about on the reverse end? Like, what would happen if you get everything going and you do trademark it, you do everything that you just said, everything's ready to rock and roll, and then you come across, or one of your fans, followers, subscribers is like, hey, there's a guy or girl trying to do what you're doing using a very similar name and basically just copying you. Then what? Now what do you do?
Send them a cease and desist. Well, what I recommend, I have clients I do this for all the time. We've sort of established a protocol where I helped the client sort of craft the initial email that they would send to that person, track down their contact information, send them a note saying, hey, hate to be this guy, but you should know, got a registered trademark. I'm asking you nicely, please change your title, take it down, whatever. And if you don't get a favorable response to that, most of the time they say, oh gosh, I had no idea. Sorry, I'll fix it. If you catch that in the first 3 episodes or so, most of the time they're pretty content to do that. If they don't cooperate, that's when you call me and you get me to write, the
nice letter, the real nice letter,
the official cease and desist. We call them nastygrams.
Yeah.
It's basically just, hey, stop it or else.
Yeah.
You got to be ready to go forward with the or else if it doesn't work. Now, the other thing is that if you're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts and iHeartRadio, you can also notify those companies, hey, this person is using a title that I own the rights to. They'll take it down pretty quickly. So, and that, at worst, it leads to some embarrassment for the podcaster, whoever's doing the infringing. So I always try to give them the polite, please take it down approach first, just so, be a good person and don't stick your thumb in their eye twice. Once gently. And then if they're giving you a hard time back, that's when you press the issue.
Yeah. And if you do have to go to the next level, can it be really, I can only imagine it being expensive for both parties.
Yeah. I mean, in a lawsuit for trademark infringement, you are talking about tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expense. And frankly, it's just years out of your life chasing after the problem. And if the trademark owner wins the case, the defendant is going to end up paying those legal fees and things in many instances. So,
and you said that can get up into like the hundreds and thousands,
easy into the 6 figures. And sometimes we even see it into 7 figures. Yeah. Most people don't have the tolerance for that level of financial pain, and big companies do, of course, but so they end up settling, and you may not ever hear about all the cases that settle because, if I send you that cease and desist letter and I can demonstrate, hey, we've got the superior rights, and if we sue you, it's going to cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're going to pretty quickly come to the table and say, okay,
Yeah.
And, I always counsel my clients to try to be gracious about it when those things happen, because the shoe could be on the other foot someday. Karma's a
Yeah.
bitch.
Yeah, definitely. And now I'm just surely curious. So if it's going to get into like the 6-figure, 7-figure mark, and let's just say the company doesn't have the deep pockets as some of these bigger companies,
Mhm.
if it's going to get to that level, I don't know if it's like this with you or any other lawyers, if they wanted to get to that number, but didn't have the money, could they work out a deal with you? It's like, hey, this is the amount of money I want. I don't have the money for the retainer to pay you up front, but you get the higher percentage if we collect. Does that make sense?
Lawyers who do the litigation and these kinds of things sometimes do work on those, back end contingency kind of deals. Trademark infringement isn't really one of those where we see a lot of that. None of the intellectual property stuff really is. Usually the party who is pursuing the claim does have to, foot the bill for their lawyer's bills. What we sometimes do is we agree that we'll bill them, over time. It's not saying if we only get paid if we win, although I guess there's some folks that do that too. But we will send you, we need a retainer up front of whatever it's going to be, and that'll take us so far. And then if we move to the next phase, we'll bill you. And we can't just stop the lawsuit because we haven't gotten paid. So at some point, now you owe us the money whether we win or not. Hopefully, and look, we win, we get the money, you pay it out of that. If not, it may take a few years to pay it down. So
sounds like a nightmare.
Well, look, I don't want to look the most.
Yeah, we're not trying to scare anybody, but like I said, I was just
Right.
curious because like, is it, you hear those big numbers.
Yeah.
I always think of those old commercials on TV, like he got me $600,000 and all that stuff, so it's like, all right.
That is the end result. Again, these giant bills that I'm talking about, that's the end result of years of it going back and forth in litigation. It doesn't get up into 7 figures or 6 figures if it settles quickly. If we have to file a lawsuit and then the other side says, okay, they're serious, maybe they hire a lawyer who tells them, you know what, you just need to settle this case.
Yeah.
You got to be careful, because if you ever do get sued, your lawyer wants to get paid for defending you, not for advising you to settle. Like you need to ask hard questions. So, but yeah, the settlements happen because, no lawyer wants to take a case that's a dog of a loser.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they think there's a legit case, they'll want to defend it. But so, you may get the advice, hey, just settle it. And then you're talking about, a few to $10,000, something like, I don't know. Every lawyer charges differently. So.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, you've been doing this a long time. You've seen it all, I'm sure. We've been talking about trademarks and, release forms and all this legal stuff for startup entrepreneurs and, digital innovators and influencers, whatever you want to call yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you have actually packaged all your knowledge now into a program. And I definitely want to hear about that.
Well, what I have is it's a training program and a set of legal templates and worksheets and all the sort of tools that you need to get the core legal stuff done for your podcast enterprise, your business. It's called Easy Legal for Podcasters. Just another one of those descriptive, not distinctive titles.
Break it. Yeah, it's all good. We're breaking all the rules today. It's all good.
Yeah, but it tells you what it is, and it's available sometimes. Not, the doors are open at easylegalforpodcasters.com. And you get a bunch of training with me, video training, as well as how-to walkthroughs about how to form your LLC or your corporation for your show, how to even how to just sort of think legit and create a vision for what you're doing, and to do some business planning, but then also how to get your team on board in the smart, safe way that makes sure you own what you think you own. Intellectual property structures, the trademarks, the copyrights, that kind of stuff, and contracts with your monetizing side, the customers and clients. So it's sort of all there. It's part of my mission is here to help people and make it affordable for people who don't want to or can't hire someone like me to do it all for them.
Yeah. And the thing I like about this program is it's all in one space, because I know even just being scattered, it's like you're going to save time by having to Google everything. And it's like, well, who do you trust? Well, it's like, well, this guy says this guy says that. And then it's just like, I know there's LegalZoom and things like that. And people go that route, I know, because it's like the cheaper way, but like what differentiates you from something like that?
Well, I'll tell you, I refer to those Rocket, Zoom, legal, whatever's as vending machine law. It essentially is pay them their money and they spit out a form. You fill in a few blanks and it spits out a form, and you don't know whether the form is any good. You don't know whether the choices that you made when you filled in the form are the right choices to have been made, because they're not giving you any background, any education, any knowledge. So you're paying for essentially a plain vanilla template and not a lot of guidance. What Easy Legal for Podcasters does is it gives you the guidance first and then says, here's the template. Look, anybody who can figure out how to create a podcast or a YouTube channel can figure out how to fill out a form, how to type the answers into a blank on a word processing document. It's knowing what to type that matters. And sometimes those prompts on the vending machines are good and sometimes they're not, and sometimes there's open questions and you guess. What we try to do is take the guesswork out of it. And when you've made the decisions about all of this stuff based on the knowledge that we share, you're creating a better, more custom, suited document to your particular needs.
And what would you say is the biggest takeaway from your program? Like, what do you hope everybody takes from it the most?
Well, my goal is that everybody has these things squared away. It's about crossing T's and dotting I's, getting it done. So often people don't get any of this stuff done because they're afraid it's going to be too expensive, or afraid they don't know what they're doing and they'll mess it up, or they're just burying their head in the sand. Oh, there's no risk. I'm not in any danger. None of those kinds of things. My real goal is to give podcasters the power, the confidence, the security, so that they can go out and do their thing, podcasting, without any niggling worry in the background about what's coming around the next corner. And because if it comes, I've got my legal protections in place. I've got my documents locked down. I've got everything figured out. I'm doing everything right. That is what makes the difference between playing the big game to win and playing the small game just not to lose.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Gordon, I really appreciate it. Where can people get? I'm going to put a link to your wait list or to your program in the show notes here and in the description, because I've been doing this on YouTube. It's going to be on YouTube as well.
Sure.
But where can we find you?
Well, GordonFiremark.com is sort of the hub and home for everything that I do. The program is at easylegalforpodcasters.com. That's spelled out, the word for, not the number, easylegalforpodcasters.com. And if you are looking for just that basic podcast guest release for podcasting and YouTube, go to guestrelease.com, and that's free. Just give me your email address and we'll be in touch.
All right. Well, Gordon, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. It's always good talking to you, man.
It's been awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. Everything I mentioned in this video, plus my free YouTube Quick Start Guide, will be in the description below. Take care, and we'll see you next time.